Well, good evening, and welcome to Kopernik Observatory. I'd like to welcome all you here at Observatory, as well as welcome those watching on our live stream. So those watching on our live stream, you can see there really are people here. So y'all want y'all wave. All right, there we go. All right, we're here. Well, anyway, it's great to see you here. A lot of new faces, at least for me, some familiar faces as well. By show of hands, who's here for the first time? All right, wow, a nice crew. By show of hands, who here is a member? Okay, well, a couple of people. All right, so what I always say is that those people that raise their hands second have a very special knowledge of the value of a Kopernik membership. So Kopernik belongs to an association called the ASTC, Association of Science and Technology Centers. And it's a consortium of over 350 other science centers throughout the country, but also even throughout the world, that honor each other's memberships. So a Kopernik membership can get you into the Franklin Institute down in Philly, or the Intrepid down in New York City, even Roberson, or the Museum of the Earth up in Ithaca. So if you like this kind of thing, a Kopernik membership is actually it's a good value. It's only $60 for a family, and it lasts a year. So we are actually approaching our 50th anniversary of the Kopernik Observatory here in the Southern Tier, and we're really quite excited about this. And we're just now, actually, 2 days from now, we will actually be starting our summer camps, the Link Summer STEM Exploration. And these are camps for students that are entering second grade through high school. And they're week-long camps, and we have a lot of fun, and we learn while we're at it. And you have a question?
I'm going to the Kopernik.
You are? Excellent. Do you know which camp you're going to?
I don't.
All right. I'll find out when you get there, I guess, right? So, next week. All right, excellent. That's the Secrets of Code. That's a very popular camp. We actually had to open a third session of that because they filled up so quickly. But we still actually have some room in that third session. So if you're interested, go to our website. Actually, here's our website. And you can go to classes and down to the summer camps. And it will show you the camps that we've got. Again, many of them are like Super Science Discoveries is waitlisted, but students' Secrets of Code is open. So our summer camps are going to be very popular. But again, every Friday night we always do some talk of some sort on some aspect of technology or science. Today happens to be ham radio. Next week we offer we do this once a year right around the 4th of July. It's called the Great Telescope Dust-Off. Now I'm sure a number of you have telescopes sitting in your attic, your garage, or your basement that haven't been used in a while. I'm seeing some nods out in the audience. So if you want, bring it up here next Friday night. We will check it out. We'll make sure that you have all the parts that you need, that you put all the parts together in the right way, and show you how to use it. So it's an opportunity to get dust that off and check it out. So, and let's see here. We one of the things that we've been doing for the past couple of years, actually, March 13th of 2020 was the last public program we had right before COVID hit, and then we had to stop. We said, well, let's see how long this is going to last, and clearly it lasted a long time. So. About in May, we decided we wanted to still stay engaged with the public. So we decided to actually start live streaming. And so we would actually have the presenters zoom into us here, and we would then turn around and put it up on our YouTube channel. The first couple of ones were pretty rough. I think you'll agree, Jeremy. But it's always a learning process, and not to say that we're error-free, but we have certainly made improvements, and we most recently just got a new streaming live stream setup, separate from the display setup. So that's been really helpful to us. And so we've actually had some very successful live stream. The most recent one that just sort of really took us to a new level was about a month ago, just a little more than a month ago. There was a lunar eclipse. I don't know if you recall that. It was in May. And Jeremy, as our live stream, you want to, you're not, just for those that are on the live stream, you can see there. So Jeremy was up here and set up his equipment on one of our telescopes and did a live stream of the lunar eclipse. Unfortunately, in a rare display of kindness, the clouds just disappeared here, and we had an outstanding live stream. At one point, we had over 25,000 people on the live stream. And in the chat, people were saying, I left the NASA live stream because I like yours better. So thank you, Jeremy, for an outstanding job. And actually tomorrow, in just a few hours, actually, Jeremy's going to do another live stream. In the morning, we have a planetary alignment that you can see Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn, along with the moon. So Jeremy will be up here. It'll be on our YouTube live stream. I think you said you're starting around 2:30? Around 2:30, yeah. 2:30 tonight. So for your night owls or your early risers or early birds, tune in sometime after 2:30 on our YouTube channel. And again, we are live streaming today. So those on the live stream, if you have any questions, put them in the chat, and Jeremy will convey them to us. All right. So I'm blown away. When I say ham radio to people, usually the eyes sort of glaze over. But this is a hobby that I've been doing for 53 years. And so let's get started. All right, so my name is Drew Deskur. I am the director here, but my ham radio call sign is KA1M. And that's one of the emails I use for ham radio.
From NPR News, it's All Things Considered. I'm Michelle Norris, and it's time now for All Tech Considered. Have you ever been driving and noticed a house with what looks to be an enormous homemade antenna? Well, it's likely the handiwork of an amateur radio operator, or ham. Hams spend their free time chatting with people all over the world without the help of the internet. Sure, ham radio may seem quaint. The name itself is century-old telegraph slang. But as Matt Sepik of St. Louis Public Radio reports, amateur radio is thriving, even in the age of Web 2.0.
With millions of us posting up-to-the-minute photos to Facebook, checking Twitter, and snuggling up to our iPhones, it's easier than ever to stay in touch. So you might assume a hobby where you make your own antennas and tap out Morse code messages would be as common today as, say, rotary phones. In fact, a few years ago, several blogs put ham radio alongside 35mm film and VHS tape on a list of things slated to disappear, but they were wrong. New amateurs like Helen Schlarman are part of an upswing. With a compact two-way radio in her house, she pushes the talk button, announces her personal call sign, and looks up a friend.
W0SJS W0AKI.
Fellow amateur Steve Schmitz answers from across town.
Hi, Helen. How you doing? W0SJS.
I'm doing just fine, Steve. How are you, and how is Wilma? And
many hams hang postcards from global contacts on their walls the way hunters show off deer antlers. But Helen Schlarman's chats are mostly local. She's 89 and says the hobby is perfect for an outgoing person who's inside a lot.
It's a different community. There is no stereotypes of age. It's just talking and sharing and enjoying.
Until recently, ham radio was declining as older operators died. But then the FCC phased out the Morse code test that many saw as a stumbling block to getting a license. Maria Soma of the American Radio Relay League says that sparked a lot of interest, especially last year.
We had over 30,000 new amateurs coming into the radio service, and the trend seems to be going upward.
Soma says today nearly 700,000 Americans have ham licenses, a nearly 60% jump over a generation ago. Alan Weiner of Gartner Research, who follows tech trends, says that's really not all that surprising. While it'll never have the sex appeal of the iPhone, Wiener, over a less-than-perfect Skype connection, says ham radio has a certain nerd appeal.
If it creates its own experience is really what's key here. If it just emulates an experience that you can get online, it's not going to grow.
At a ham radio convention near St. Louis, the crowd swapping antenna parts and other equipment is mostly male and mostly over 50, but the hobby has attracted 15-year-old Jonathan Dunn. He says Facebook and texting are fun, but making friends using a $200 radio that doesn't come with monthly fees is more rewarding.
With ham radio, you can talk to new people of, all kinds of ages, race. I mean, it's just amazing what a little radio can do, because no matter where you're at, most likely, if you have the right stuff and the right power, you can talk to anyone.
Even though amateur radio is often more about the medium than the message, Jonathan's father, Steve Dunn, says all that polite chit-chat is still important, especially for a teenager.
If young people have the opportunity to communicate with a wide range of people, that instills a certain amount of confidence in their ability to carry on the lost art of small talk.
Even the most die-hard hams concede theirs will never be a mainstream hobby, and with smartphones and the internet, people are more plugged in than ever. But even so, there are those who still find great joy in communicating with 20th century technology. For NPR News, I'm Matt Sepik in St. Louis.
All right, so that news piece came out a couple years ago, and they mentioned that, saying that there's currently over 700,000 hams. Currently, as of this month, there's something like 775,000 here just in the United States. So it is definitely a growing hobby. And actually, here's a sort of a famous ham that some of the people with grayer hair might recognize. This is Joe Walsh of the Eagles, and he's been a ham for many, many years. And so there've been a number of other famous hams, but this one, again, I'm sort of a rocker, so I sort of gravitate to Joe Walsh. Anyway, so ham radio, the perfect hobby. So let's go to Wikipedia. What is the definition of a hobby? And again, I shouldn't read this to you, but I'm just going to go through anyway. It says, a hobby is a regular activity that's done for enjoyment, typically during one's leisure time. Hobbies can include collecting themed items and objects, engaging in creative artistic pursuits, playing sports, or pursuing other amusements. All right, and now let's continue on. And so what kind of things would you consider in a hobby? So it's making things or tinkering, some kind of activity, either outdoors or gardening, something like that, or some liberal arts pursuits, music or writing. Of course, there's sports and games, or just collecting. So I'll show you how ham radio sort of fits into all of these categories. So again, going back to Wikipedia, the definition of amateur radio, ham radio is just the use of radio frequency spectrum for purposes of non-commercial exchanges of messages, wireless experimentation, self-training, private recreation, radio sport, contesting, and emergency communication. That's a pretty good summary, I'd say. And so let's talk about some of the history. How did the ham radio sort of get started? Well, it really began in the late 1880s with Marconi doing his experiments with radio communication. And actually, by 1909, there was already a call book, we call it, of 89 wireless telegraph stations, people that were experimenting with radio. Typically, at the time it was spark gap. But again, these are sort of the uber nerds of the earliest 20th century. Now, I don't know if you knew this, but there's actually a relatively famous early radio experiment here in the Binghamton area, and that's in downtown Binghamton. Marconi set up a tower in Binghamton to test an experiment with communication between a fixed station, like here at this radio station, at this train station, and a moving train. They actually put a radio on the moving train and wanted to see if they could communicate using that. And that radio tower was this radio tower was here in Binghamton. There was another set in Scranton, but it's one of those towers still exists here. It's actually behind the post office in Binghamton, near the I think it's Marabito Station now, where the Rumble Ponies stay. There's I think it's on Lewis Street, and there's actually that tower still exists. In fact, and I'll talk a little bit later about the radio club that sits here, called the Binghamton Amateur Radio Association. Every April, there's an event called International Marconi Day, and we actually go down to this tower. The Binghamton Fire Department helps us string an antenna up onto the tower, and we operate as one of the original Marconi stations, one of the very few that actually still left in the world. So we're sort of very fortunate to have that. All right, so talking about ham radio, they really, these people started experimenting, having fun, but ultimately developed a wide range of communication technologies and techniques. So FM, like the radio, if you're listening to WSKG or the Hawk or whatever other FM radio station, that whole modulation technique was actually developed by ham radio operators. Television was actually invented by, in the first experimentation with trying to wirelessly send a video signal from one location to another was sort of experimented with by hams. Search and rescue satellites. The whole GPS, location system was actually, proof of concept was done using ham radio satellites. I don't mean to sound like the father in My Big Fat Greek Wedding, that everything. I don't know if you remember people ever seeing that movie, but talked about the father there said that every scientific discovery, any classic art, literature comes from the Greek. So anyway, all technology has come from ham radio. Digital wireless communication, and we started trying to get our computers to talk to each other through radios. And VoIP is a voice over IP, which actually, if you've got a cable telephone at home, it's using voice over IP. Now, what do we do as ham radio operators? Bottom line is we're really just interested in some form of communication. But how we do that is really sort of where we can all sort of take our own separate, our own paths, toward enjoyment on that. So, some of the options are, of course, voice. That's the easiest one. It's the most easiest one to sort of get started with. But Morse code is still actually used very often. They mentioned in the previous, in that NPR piece, that the originally you needed to know Morse code in order to get your license. And depending on what level of license, you needed to know faster and faster Morse code. They've since eliminated the requirement, but people still use Morse code. It's actually a very power-efficient mode of communication. I mentioned video. So people do, we'll have their own, TV, full motion TV. Also, they do what's called slow scan TV, where they actually take a picture, and then through an audio channel, we'll actually send that picture using audio tones, and we've actually done it here at Kopernik. The International Space Station does it as well. There are also digital modes where we can communicate very long distances, even with very poor propagation and with a lot of success. Now, how do we do it? Well, you have to set up a station. And what does a station consist of? It's a transmitter and a receiver. Most of the time, these days, they're sort of all in one box. But when I first got started, back in the 1960s, I had a separate receiver and a separate transmitter. And then you need an antenna, some way to get that energy out into the ether. Now there are commercial pieces of equipment, like this piece of gear right here, that you can buy. You can buy it new, you can buy it used, but also people will build their own. We call that homebrew. My dad was a big home brewer. I did not get that gene, however. Then antennas, and it can be very simple. Literally, it can be just a wire. In fact, you may or may not have seen it as you were walking in. There were some wires actually hanging off of one of the flagpoles going in this direction. There's also a little portable tower here that had some beams on it. So something that looks like this, we call this sort of a big gun antenna. And then, but again, a wire antenna gets the job done. Now, why do we do it? Ultimately, it's sort of to meet and make new friends. And feed our inner geek. It's an opportunity. It's certainly something that, again, I got my license when I was 12 years old, and it just starting to play around with this equipment, trying to find ways to make it more efficient, make it better. That just sort of ultimately drove me to go into engineering as a career. Bottom line, it's a way to explore, experiment, and play. This really is play for me. And sometimes unseen, but a very important part of what ham radio does is public service. And we'll sort of get into that a little deeper later on. Why we do it. All right, so here. This is part of the public service piece here.
Imagine this scenario after a hurricane hits South Florida. The internet is down, cell towers aren't working, you can't even make a call on a landline. How would you communicate in an emergency? How would you get help? We may all be relying on technology that's 100 years old on the radio.
WX4 NHC, National Hurricane Center in Miami for net control.
They're called amateur radio operators, hams for short, and they fill a special role here at the National Hurricane Center. They communicate in ways others can't.
We have a group of about 30 volunteers, and they come in here during hurricanes that are anywhere in the Atlantic.
The National Hurricane Center relies on data and weather observations for their forecasts and reports. But sometimes the weather data can't be transmitted, either because there's no internet or sometimes because the weather is just too bad.
Many times we basically fill in the gaps from all the other weather data that they get through satellite and air reconnaissance and all that. And there's some gaps on the surface that they may not have. So we fill in those reports. We basically take surface reports from other hams that have weather stations and then relay them here to the hurricane forecasters.
Sometimes they not only report the weather, but become part of the action.
It happened during Hurricane Katrina, which is not that long ago.
Other times, hams are the life-saving backbone in a natural disaster.
We have in our group doctors, architects, engineers. They all bring their own set of skills as well as their communication skill. We get paid nothing because we're volunteers, but we get paid in the satisfaction that what we do, we feel is important, and we feel that it actually does help lives in the long run.
And Julio has one important bit of advice for all of us.
Have a communications plan with your family. Where are you going to be? If you lose cell phone communications, where are you going to meet? You know, because sometimes you can't talk to each other.
So if the power goes out and the internet goes down, we may all be relying on technology that's 100 years old to get help to where it's needed.
Are there any other stations on frequency that can copy the Hurricane Center? Over. QSL Net Control, this is Whiskey X-Ray 4, National Hurricane Center in Miami, Florida. Name is Julio.
All right. So, so this is sort of a little tagline we use is, you know, when all else fails, amateur radio works. Actually, back in the 1970s, Hurricane Agnes came through New York and really wiped out Elmira. And in fact, actually, I think in the press, they just recently had a couple of articles about that. And yes, yep. And so I was 17 years old at the time, and I brought my ham radio gear. They put me on a C-130 in Broome County Airport and then flew me to Elmira Airport with my gear. And I spent a week basically providing communication for people that I had a big computer listing of people's names, their addresses, and whether they were still in their home or whether they're in a Red Cross center. And so people would be calling into the station that was set up, and I was basically operating like 20 hours a day, looking up. Okay, up the Murphys are on on Main Street. Up they're in the Red Cross center at the elementary school, and so it does get used a lot. In fact, back a couple years ago with Hurricane Maria, that hit and really wiped out Puerto Rico, ham radio operators basically were providing almost all the communication for months for emergency communication until they could get the infrastructure back in place. All right, so now how do you actually become a ham? And you have to pass a Federal Communications test. And it's a written exam, but there's some technical questions, some rules and regulations, of course, safety, station setup and operating, and communication modes. And there have been kids who have been 5 years old that have gotten their ham radio license, and people that are 105 that have gotten, just to be clear, as well as some information about emergency and public service communication. Now, there are 3 different license levels. The entry level is called the technician. There's 35 questions for that. The next level is called general class, and then finally, the top level, the PhD, if you will, of ham radio is called extra, and then you're getting into much deeper technical expertise. But again, no longer is there a Morse code requirement. It used to be for like the novice or technician license, you needed 5 words a minute, and a word is considered 5 letters. So basically, at 5 words a minute, it was a letter every 2 seconds. 20 words a minute is basically 100 words, so it's 2 letters in a second. So it's sort of moving on and moving along quickly. Now, the reason they have these 3 different licenses is they want you to become more proficient and more knowledgeable about the equipment you're using and the hobby. And so what they do is they give you, if you get your initial license, you're allowed to use certain frequencies and certain modes of operation. So the technician license typically allows you equipment that you can mostly just talk locally. But then if you want to talk far distances, that's where you need at least the general class license. And so again, they're trying to get you to study a bit more to get that. And then the extra class license gives me even more spectrum available. You have a question?
If you're talking to somebody on the other side of the world,
Mm-hmm.
why doesn't it just go off into space?
Okay, well, we'll talk about it. The question was if we're talking about somebody on the other side of the world, why does not the radio signal just go right off into space? Well, it depends on what frequency I'm transmitting on. Some frequencies, the very high frequencies, would just go straight through the ionosphere and go out into space. But if I'm using a lower frequency, it bounces off a portion of the atmosphere called the ionosphere, and it bounces off it sort of bounces off the ionosphere, bounces off the Earth, and that's how we can talk around the world. So it depends on the frequency that you're on. That's a great question, actually. All right. So as I mentioned, as you get a higher license, your spectrum privileges increase. All right. So now, how do you actually do this? How do you actually learn? There are written study guides out there. You can actually buy books to learn this. There are apps for your phone. There are websites that you can go to. And all of these questions are actually published already. So you actually get to know what the questions are. And a lot of these apps and websites will actually, give you some, you can sort of take a practice test. And if you get a question wrong, they will say, okay, this is why your answer is incorrect, and here's why the correct answer is correct. And then some of these apps actually know which questions you get wrong, and then sort of will ask it to ask you later. So it sort of keeps working at it. All right. The other thing also is just talking to other hams. In ham radio speak, we call that Elmers. It's somebody who's willing to sort of answer the questions for you. I mean, these apps and stuff are great, but if you just need a little more explanation about something, that's where talking to a real person can really help. Now, it used to be that you used to have to go to an FCC center to take a test, but no longer. There are volunteer examiners that actually, the ham radio operators that will do the sort of proctor the test for you, if you will. We do that here at Kopernik. There is a ham radio club that meets here, and every third Wednesday of the month we have a meeting. But before that meeting, we offer the exam for free. Also down at the Vestal Library, there's a ham that will do it down there as well. So now we're going to sort of wrap back around to the Wikipedia listing I had of what's a hobby. And so we talked about making and tinkering. So we talked about the homebrew equipment, even something as simple as an antenna. Or you can do some little add-on gear. You might have maybe a special Morse code memory device that may remember certain Morse code passages, and you can use that to send that out. People will go ahead and make their own transmitters or receivers or amplifiers. I can actually have up to 1,500 watts, I think, of power to really try to get my signal out. All right, so outdoor recreation, activity participation. So there's actually a program called Summits on the Air. So people will be hiking to the top of mountains. They'll bring their gear with them and start making contacts. People will be on boats and do that. And actually, many sailors, many mariners, along with the naval radios that they would normally have, often bring ham radios with them because, in many ways, especially if you're out in the deep ocean, the ship-to-shore radios are VHF and they really don't go very far. That's where the ham radio, if you get in trouble, the ham radio is what's gonna help you. And there's a thing called Parks on the Air. So if people go out camping, or even just we'll go to the Shenango Valley State Park and we'll set up and talk to other hams using some modest equipment. Gardening. Well, I say, maybe this is a stretch on gardening, but this actually is a ham radio antenna system that one gentleman had. So some people really get into it. I don't know if he was actually planting the aluminum or not, but he's got a good crop going there. Okay, so liberal arts pursuits. Again, public speaking. It's when you first start getting on the air, talking on a microphone, very much people end up talking about being mic shy. But then after a while, you can't get them to stop. But ultimately, and that's a good skill for all of us to have, is to be comfortable talking, in public. And geography and travel. I remember when I was in high school, I would be doing European history, and I'd be taking notes. And what I used to do is, when they would talk about Germany or Czechoslovakia or something in history, I would use the ham radio prefix for a call sign that would be out. Rather than write out Czechoslovakia, I would put LZ or something like that on there. But that was just what I did. The other thing, actually, with travel, a number of years ago, I was on my honeymoon, and I was actually in Europe, in Austria. And my wife and I it was in October, and we were in Innsbruck, and I wanted to go to the top of the mountain. The gondolas were working, even though there was no snow there. So, but I wanted to just get to the top of, and take a look at the Alps from up there. So we took the gondola up there, and we're looking around. It's beautiful, and then I see this building with a couple of antennas on there. So of course I'm sort of attracted to that, and I walk up to the building, and in German there was a sign that said something or other, radio amateurisch. I was like, well, sounds possible. So, and I thought I heard some people talking inside, so I knocked on the door, and the door opened up, and I said, "Sprechen Sie English?" And he says, "Yes." Is this an amateur radio station? Yes, amateur radio is our hobby. So I said, "Well, I'm KA1M." Well, literally, the guy just grabbed me by my collar and pulled me into the building. It was the club station for the Innsbruck radio club, and they were doing some work, on their equipment and antennas, and they didn't know me from anybody. But the fact that I was a ham radio operator, immediately I was like one of their best long lost friends. And I said, well, my wife, my newlywed wife is here, so brought her in here. Then we found out that we were on a honeymoon. Well, they brought out the wine, they brought out the sausages, and they yodeled to us. It was just an extraordinary event. And again, they didn't know me from anybody, but the fact that I was a ham, immediately there was this fellowship that it was really tough to explain, and it's very unlikely I would have gotten that same reaction from if I wasn't a ham. All right, sports and hobbies. So contests. So one of the things that hams will do is they'll on a weekend we'll try to contact numerous other hams, and some these contests can be have a different spin to them. Some of them might be like, okay, this will be only Morse code, or this might be the New York State. They call it a QSO party. QSO is a ham speak for just having a conversation. So people are trying to talk to as many New York State stations as possible. Tomorrow is actually an event called Field Day, and it's they say it's not a contest, but basically it's an opportunity for hams to put their emergency equipment to test. And so what they'll do is they will set up equipment. So if you looked outside, there's a couple of antennas set up. And so tomorrow, starting at 2 o'clock, we'll go for 24 hours. There'll be hams here trying to talk to other hams throughout the country. And typically on weekends, there's a thing called fox hunts where we may have a little transmitter, and that's sort of hidden out in the area, and we'll sit there and try and track it down, and use special equipment to sort of help us triangulate and find it. And you can get various awards for working 100 different countries, or all the states. Now, collecting. In the first piece that I showed you, there was a gentleman that had a whole bunch of postcards back behind him. We call these things QSL cards. And a QSL means sort of a confirmation. And a QSL card means that when I have a conversation with somebody, I can send them a card with my call sign on it saying that, on this date, on this frequency, on this mode, I spoke with this person. And they often will send me one back. This happens to be a QSL card from the International Space Station. There is actually ham radio on the ISS, and in fact, it's been on there since the year 2000. It's actually the longest running experiment on the ISS. And one of the things that NASA does, many of the astronauts are actually licensed ham radio operators, and they do school contacts. So, schools and universities will petition to have one of these contacts happen. Kopernik has actually had 6 of these, and we will have another one this coming summer, where our students in our summer camp called Welcome Aboard the ISS will have an opportunity to speak to an astronaut as they're flying by at 17,500 miles an hour. And so we actually have to send the questions to NASA in advance, so that the number one, to make sure that the questions are appropriate, but also gives the astronaut an opportunity to think about what they want to respond. Because remember how you were asking about why does the signal just wouldn't go off into space? Well, in order for us to talk to the space station, we have to use a frequency that does go out into space, but that means also that it doesn't bend around the Earth. So we can only talk to the ISS when it's above the horizon. So when we have what's called an overhead pass, where if it's coming right above the horizon and goes directly above us and then sets right behind us, we might have a total of 11 minutes to talk to it. And so we've got to be very efficient with our communication. But there've been a couple of sort of funny questions and answers. One of the ones we had just this last time we did it, was one of our students asked, what happens when you sneeze during a spacewalk? That's a good question. And the astronaut, he said, well, that actually happened twice to me. Usually what you do when you feel a sneeze coming on, you just sort of bend your head down and sneeze down into your chest. But one time, the sneeze just completely caught me by surprise, and all the boogers went all over the face shield. And I'm thinking to myself, that's got to be the first time boogers have ever been used as part of a school answer. You know, thinking about 300 or 400 standard questions. You know, where do you sleep? How do you go to the bathroom? You know, what do you miss most? But you know, boogers have. That's got to be the first time that's ever happened. All right, so again, we call this QSL cards, and this is actually Doug Wheelock. Doug Wheelock is an astronaut who grew up in Windsor. And he is actually, this is a picture of him talking on the ham radio station on the ISS. So let's take a listen to this. Let's see here. NA1SS, NA1SS, Kilo 2 Zulu, Romeo Oscar. Are you ready? So this is NA1SS is the call sign. NA1SS, NA1SS, Kilo 2, Zulu, Romeo Oscar. Do you copy? NA1SS is the call sign on the International Station. K2ZRO is the station here. I'm getting a little nervous because I'm calling. NA1SS, NA1SS, Kilo 2, Zulu, Romeo Oscar. Do you copy, Colonel Wheelock?
Kilo 2, Zulu, Romeo Oscar. We've got you loud and clear. Welcome aboard the International Space Station. November Alpha 1, Sierra Sierra.
This is Brendan. How well are plants growing on the space station? Over.
The way that we bathe actually is kind of like to take a wet washcloth and just kind of.
Listen how this student asks this question and what Doug says.
That we can use to clean our bodies and stuff. So it's not as good as taking a long hot shower, but it works while you're in space. Over.
This is Matthew Colosi. What is the most significant discovery you've made since arriving on the ISS? Over.
Matthew, are you any relation to the Colosis that lived 2 houses away from me when I was a kid?
Yes, I'm Alan's son.
All right, so his dad was school year neighbors with Doug Wheelock, and I mean, how much closer can you have gotten? So, so it was a lot of fun doing those, and so again, we'll have another one this coming fall. This coming summer. All right. Again, hams love experimenting, and we're constantly pushing technology. Hams will even bounce signals off the moon. We actually use it as a passive reflector. We've even bounced signals off Mars. And again, the digital communication and networking just continues to really flourish. What we do here at Kopernik, satellites. K2ZRO was actually the call center of my father, and he was big into ham radio satellites. And he passed away in the 1980s, but we were able to get his call sign to be the club sign here. And so this equipment here is actually what we use when we want to communicate through ham radio satellites. It's also what we use when we talk to the International Space Station. All right, so I think at this point, oh yeah, I was going to, the Binghamton Amateur Radio Association is the local ham radio club that actually meets here. And so a number of years ago, Johnny Hart, the author of the BC comic strip, gave us a nice little cartoon for ourselves here. All right, so I think at this point, I mentioned tomorrow is the field day event, and again, you're welcome to come up here anytime after 2 o'clock. But right now, we are going to try and do some demonstrations, and I was talking with a gentleman earlier today. Mark, I'm ready for a contact. Are you? Question mark. And there is a gentleman who actually is up at the Adirondack Public Observatory in Tupper Lake, and he said, why don't we do an observatory-to-observatory contact today? So I've got some equipment right here, and let's see if I can turn up the audio.
Roll to the waterfall and here, and I'll just hang out and listen. That's funny. And the call is the bigger 7, Lima Charlie Tango.
All right, so the frequency I'm talking on right here is one of those frequencies that you can talk long distances on. So we'll see.
I'm located in Jacksonville, Florida.
Jacksonville, Florida.
2 Mike. And you got a good strong 5.9 signal here. Some QSB, little static crashes, but you're coming right over it there. How you copy me? Over. I got you coming in at 5859. Sounded good. And all right. What radio and antenna are you working with over there? I've got a Icon 7300 that seems to be ubiquitous.
All right. Well, I'm waiting for him to. I'm gonna try to find a sort of a clear frequency that I don't hear anybody else talking, and then I'm gonna basically try to initiate a contact. And you do that by saying CQ, as in the letter C and the letter Q, but you could also think of it as seek you. And I'll give my call sign, and we'll see if somebody comes back. But I gotta find a clear frequency first.
All right. Good job there on that, Chief. Trying to think what I'm trying to say, but
Or if I hear somebody calling CQ, I'll call them.
Kilo Bravo 2 Tango Delta Tango. All right, Kilo Bravo 2 Tango Delta Tango. Thanks for your call. 5-9 over. Yeah, you're also 5x9 post 20 here into Western New York. Hey, very cool. Thanks for the flowers from Western New York. You were in the log, 73. Kilo Delta 3 Delta.
All right. So what you heard there. So again, typically, sometimes hams will sit there and have a nice long conversation. Other times they'll be just sort of like, let's make a contact and then we'll move on to the next person. They said, so they give their call sign. Often it'll be in phonetics because a B sounds like a D, sounds like a T, sounds like a G. So with my call sign, I go Kilo Alpha 1 Mike, KA1M. And then they will give what they call a signal report. So 5, like from 1 to 5, 5 means I can read the whole thing very well. If it's 4, well, I'm getting most of what you're saying. And then the second number will give a relative strength. So
20 as well, right? That is correct.
QRZ frequency, Kilo 2 Zulu Romeo Oscar.
240. Hello, 240. N1 FJB. Number 1 Fox. Juliet Bravo, calling CQ, N1 FJB.
The station calling CQ, this is Kilo 2 Zulu Romeo Oscar, K2ZRO. Copy?
K2ZRO, number 1 Fox, Juliet Bravo, N1 FJB.
You're a little low in the mud here. One more time. This is Kilo 2 Zulu Romeo Oscar. One more time. I guess he's not hearing me.
N1 FJB, November 1 Fox, Juliet Bravo, N1 FJB, November 1 Fox, Juliet Bravo.
November 1 Fox Zulu Bravo. This is Kilo 2 Zulu Romeo Oscar. Thank you for coming back. I'm actually doing a ham radio demonstration at the Kopernik Observatory. You're about a 5.6 into Vestal, New York. 5.6 into Vestal, New York. Handler is Drew, Delta Romeo Echo Whiskey. November 1 Fox Tango Bravo, Kilo 2 Zulu Romeo Oscar.
November 1 Fox, Juliet Bravo, N1 FJB, November 1 Fox, Juliet Bravo.
QSL Fox Juliet Bravo.
Delta, Roger, yes. Correct. Yeah, name here is Scott. Sierra, Charlie, Oscar, Tango, Tango. We're in Raleigh, North Carolina area, just outside of Raleigh. And you're going to 5556 there, over.
All right, thank you for the 5556. Give me the QTH again, QTH.
Yeah, just outside of Raleigh, North Carolina.
All right, very good. Thank you very much. Again, we're in at the Kopernik Observatory in upstate New York. All right, well, thank you very much, Scott. Thanks, 73, and enjoy the rest of the evening. Number 1, Fox, Juliet Bravo, Kilo 2, Zulu, Romeo Oscar, 73.
Okay, Kilo 2, Zulu, Romeo Oscar. Okay, great. Thanks, so 73.
All right, that was a little harder conversation than I had hoped for, but let's see if I can find a little more stronger station to talk to.
Roger. On business. Thank you very much for hunting. Enjoy your food. 73. Many thanks. QRZ.
All right, what you're hearing there is what we call a talent. So there must be some station there that a lot of people want to talk to, and so there'll be a number of people trying to actually communicate to them at the same time.
Yeah, I have you 59 also in North Carolina. I got distracted. Thanks for the contact, 73. Have a good weekend. Roger. Thank you very much to the 59 North Carolina. Have a good night. 73 is there. QRT only. Come again? Roger. November Sierra. Roger, combo 0619 and 55. Thank you much. 73. Roger. AI 0 for Fox Sierra. QRZ.
Kilo 2, Zulu, Romeo Oscar.
9 station, go ahead. 9 station, go ahead. CQ, this is Parks on the air. This is Kilo India 0. Echo Bravo at Kilo 1274. Blue X Battlefield State Park.
Okay, so this is actually a station at a state park.
Whiskey Sierra, Uniform November. Whiskey Sierra, Uniform November.
Now this website.
You're 59 Virginia. Thanks a lot for the late shift, 73. Roger, thanks Virginia, 73. KI0B for Parks of the Air, QRZ. Kilo Charlie 1, Delta Bravo Radio. Kilo Charlie 1, Delta Bravo Romeo, 5-4 Quebec. Copy the 5-4, I have you 3333. Can I have the park number? 1274, thank you. 73, QRZ. CQ, this is Parks on the air. This is Kilo India 0, Echo Bravo at Kilo 1274. Blue Battlefield, State Park, Kentucky.
Kilowatt 2, Zulu, Romeo Oscar, K2ZRO.
QRZ.
Kilowatt 2, Zanzibar Radio, Ontario, Kilo 2, Zulu, Romeo Oscar.
Victor and Oscar, go ahead.
Kilowatt 2, Zulu, Romeo Oscar. All right, thank you. You're about a 5858 into upstate New York. Thank you.
Thanks, New York, 73.
That's it.
This is KI-30D for Parks of the Air, QRZ.
All right, so this gentleman lives in Kentucky.
Alpha India.
So, well, anyway, to give you a sense of, the kind of stuff we can do. As a matter of interest, hold on. I'm going to try a different band. Let me give us some. All right. So the band I'd hoped for appears to be, there's not much activity on it.
November 8 Ocean, back to you.
Let's see. Okay, right now I'm just sort of adjusting the transmitter to be on this frequency. See if he comes back again.
Okay, Dortmund goes Delta United Romeo, Bravo India November. All of that name for me. So anyway, thank you for Shortcast. Whiskey 0, Victor Oscar Portable. November 8, Oscar Oscar. See you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
November 8, Oscar Oscar. This is Kilo 2 Zulu, Romeo Oscar.
Okay, November 8, Oscar Oscar. Secure 20 instead and bye. November 9, Sugar Queen Queen.
Kilo 2 Zulu, Romeo Oscar.
Kilowatt 2, Zulu, Romeo Oscar. He's strong. 5-9, my name is Victor, state of Louisiana, over.
Thank you very much, Victor. Kilo 2 Zulu, Romeo Oscar.
Handle what?
What's
Delta Romeo Echo Whiskey, right? Well, see my English second language, I got correct. Delta Romeo Echo Whiskey, Drew. Nice to meet you, Drew. You're 5 and 9 plus. Good signal. Kilowatt 2 Zulu Romeo Oscar, November 8 Ocean Hours. Back to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. We are actually at the Kopernik Observatory in Florence, so now I'm doing a demonstration on air radio, and you are one of our contacts. So thank you very much. You also pouring on into upstate New York, 73, and maybe we'll see you on field day tomorrow.
Nice to meet you, Drew. See you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Hold on, here we go. Right. So, okay, so now I'm back on my my lavalier mic. So any questions? Yeah, go ahead.
What were those bang sounds? That sounded like guns.
Okay, those banging sounds. Well, sometimes what happens is the radio signal was actually interfering with my audio signal. So it wasn't a gun at all. It was just the way this is set up. It was sort of interfering with the radios, with my wireless mic, and so that's all it was. Yeah, go ahead.
So, how many stations are able to be on the same frequency at the same time, or just unlimited?
Okay, so the question was how many stations can be on the same frequency at the same time? Well, it depends, like everything else in the world. Depending on the how the propagation works. Sometimes you might have 5 or 6 or 7 other stations on the same frequency, but the way your signal is bouncing off the ionosphere, it will actually skip over another station that would be on there. So you heard me earlier saying QRZ frequency, meaning is there anybody else on this frequency? If there was, somebody would say, yep, this frequency is in use. And it could well have been in use somewhere, but they couldn't hear me and I couldn't hear them, so we would just continue on doing what we're doing. But the frequencies we're working on right here, I've got anywhere between 150 and 400 kilohertz of bandwidth that I can operate within. But yet a voice signal will only take maybe 3 or 4 kilohertz of band, so you can have multiple conversations. And so as I was tuning, you could hear me. Sometimes it sort of sounded like Donald Duck, you know. hard to understand that.
QSL, Kilo 8, X-Ray Juliet, copy to 52 Ohio, you're 5454, Kilo 1940, also Ohio, QSL.
All right, so this is another Parks on the Air.
Roger, roger, thanks for hunting, 73, Whiskey 8, Foxtrot, November Golf, Parks on the Air.
So, anyway, so as I was tuning, you could hear it. It finally make it understandable. Now, what's interesting is, I mean, when I first got my license, my voice hadn't changed yet, and so when I would get on the air, and I'd be sometimes trying to cut through a pileup, remember when all those stations trying to come up, the pitch of my voice was a little higher than everybody else's, and at times it sort of sounded like a woman. And there are women in ham radio, not that many, although I have to say my wife and my two daughters are actually all hams. But the guy I was trying to contact said, there's a YL, meaning young lady. There's a YL out there. Come on back. Then I heard nothing. So I gave my call sign. Yeah, you. Well, it's all right. I got the contact. You can call me what you want. And but like I said, I've been doing this since I was 12 years old, and it's given me some wonderful opportunities to meet some great people and do a lot of good work. Actually, I was just last weekend was the Vessel 20K race, and hams provided communication at the various water stops and to make sure that that all the runners were going in the right direction, and if anybody needed help, that we could dispatch an ambulance to help them with that. So. Any other questions, either here or on the web?
Yeah, we have one up here. Here we go. So from KKEM on YouTube, they're asking for tomorrow, the field day, what call sign and exchange.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So this is it sounds like another ham radio operator asking about what call sign. So the ham radio call sign of the club that we're using, that is up here, is W2OW, Whiskey 2 Ocean Whiskey. Is the phonetics, and we will be operating what's called 7A. So we will have up to 7 different transmitters on different frequencies, all trying to communicate all at the same time. And we'll be using emergency generator power as well as solar power. We actually have some leftover solar panels from the solar panels that we have out in the backyard, and we have a deep cell battery. And so I've been charging it up over the last month. And so tomorrow, during the day, it's sunny, we'll be using the power that the sun's providing us. But then as it gets into the night, we'll just use the reserve that's in the battery. And but the rest will be done on a regular generator. Any other questions? Or we're good?
That's everything.
Another question? Yeah, in the back? Okay, yeah, so we have a couple of antennas. Part of what field day is you're supposed to set up antennas that don't already exist. So like out in the parking lot, there's a trailer with a beam on it. So we'll be using that. We've got another antenna that goes from one of our flagpoles out toward the solar panels. There's another. The antenna I was using here actually starts on the roof here and goes up to a telephone pole that we have a little pulley that we pulled up on. So. But then other people will bring their own antennas and set up. They work out of their car or whatever. So. All right. Well, anyway, we had a couple of good contacts, but also I think we've got a couple of good opportunities to do some nighttime observing. And the rule we have here is you cannot leave Kopernik until you look through a telescope. All right. I'll take your keys. And you get them back after you get your look through the telescope. So we've got some, hopefully some deep sky objects. Right now, as I said, all the planets and the moon are early morning events. So we won't have anything to show you as far as the planet goes, but we may be able to show you some, either some nebulas, some star clusters, and we've got a couple of scopes out in the yard. You have another question? Yeah.
one that's like sticking out, that one. Are we allowed to go in the one like that?
Well, any of the scopes that we have open that have people next to them, you can absolutely go to.
Any of them?
Yep. All right. Now, but there should be somebody at each of the scopes, so they'll tell you how to look at, how to go to it. The thing about the scopes is you don't touch the scope. And it's not that we don't trust you. It's just that you'll end up moving the scope. So all you need to do is, have them show you where the eyepiece is, and then you just get right close up to it, and they'll tell you what you're looking at. All right. All right. This just one last little thing here is this website called QRZ is a place where I can put in a call sign and look anybody up. So if I put K2ZRO, and that happens to be the club sign of the Kopernik Observatory and Science Center, and I have a little bit of information about us and what we do. I can put my call sign in, KA1M, and I talk about first licensed in 1968 while I was still 12, and and that's my home setup that I got down in the basement. So you can look up basically anybody, and the guy from the observatory just texted me. So if you feel free if you want to go and check out the scopes. Otherwise, I'm going to try to get that guy on from the other observatory. So let's see if we get QRZ frequency, QRZ frequency. I'll tell them where we are. And this is Kilo 2, Zulu Romeo Oscar, Kilowatt 2, Zanzibar, Radio, Ontario. Looking for Tupper Lake, the Adirondack Public Observatory. You on, Mark? This is Kilo 2, Zulu Romeo Oscar, Kilowatt 2, Zanzibar, Radio, Ontario. Now, I did talk to him earlier today, but the propagation may have changed, so we'll see what happens here. November 2, Papa Romeo Delta. November 2, Papa Romeo Delta. This is Kilo 2, Zulu Romeo Oscar, K2ZRO. You're on, Mark? November 2, Papa Radio Delta. November 2, PRD. This is Kilo 2, Zulu Romeo Oscar. Copy? So the propagation may have changed. November 2, Papa Romeo Delta, Kilo 2, Zulu Romeo Oscar, K2ZRO. Copy, Mark? This is Kilo 2, Zulu Romeo Oscar. Yeah, you're probably about a 3x3, so propagation has changed. But thanks for giving it a shot. N2PRD, K2ZRO. So we'd hope to be able to do the observatory contact, but I guess propagation has changed. Well, anyway, I do want to thank you all for coming and hanging here. If you have any other questions, feel free to give me a call, but please make sure you go out and check out the scopes. All right, take care.